Okay, so good morning once more. Mm, Welcome to today's class. So in our previous class, we started building our application, Epic Notes app, using Nest.js. So we were able to set up our application, install dependencies, um, structure the whole application, and also initialize Prisma. So today, we will continue from where we stopped. And the next thing to do is to set up the Prisma service, where we create Prisma service. After that, we create Prisma module, and then we seed our database to test out things. Great. So let's get started. So here we are. Yeah, so first of all, we were in a haste and I was not able to explain this file. So I will give you a hint of what's actually going on here. Check our envy, everything is set. Let's do away with this one. Great, so we are good. Configuration. We don't need to even add some defaults. Okay, let's default that. Remove this. Remove this one. This and also this. Okay, so we are what we are doing here, we are validating with Zod. So Zod is used for validation. It's a TypeScript library used for validation. So what we're actually doing, we're defining a schema, and this schema we're saying we're expecting this to be an object. So we're expecting it to be an object with a port. A port should be a string. And if it is not provided, then we want to default it to 3000. But if provided, it must be a string. The node env, that is the node environment, also should be a string and it must be provided. The session secret also should be a string and should also be provided. The session max age, also a string, bcrypt sort rounds, string as well. So this is supposed to be a number and some of these things, but then we handle that because everything in the env file is a string, they later converted. But then what's happening here is they will try to validate, we try to add all these environment variables to we declare the global Node.js namespace, and then we add interface process env. We will try to validate process env, extend z infer type of schema. So we have node. Let's say node JS. Okay, let's say node treatment. So I'm trying to, okay. So adding this to the Node.js interface, and this is a schema actually. So if file here is we are converting it to an object. So if you see const schema type, this is equal to z infer z infer. You see this is type of our schema like this. Okay. So let me just grab this quickly. So here, supposed to be here, but then why one is in touch? Okay, so I don't know what's happening here. Can't really tell, but that's basically how to convert a schema to a type, like to represent it in TypeScript. You just infer the schema. So what we're trying to do here, we're trying to validate this environment variable. So we're writing a function. So we're trying to pass the process env. Process env here, this is an interface. So we're trying to add all of these things. So when we infer this, it will return the types: port string, Nodejs string, session secret string. So when it returns the types, we'll add it to the process env in the Node.js namespace. So we're trying to parse the schema when we start our application. So what Zod is doing is passing the schema. So this parse now will return, look at what the parse is returning. But what the parse actually, the parse object contains data, error, and success. So if we pass and there are no errors, it will return success to true. But if there are errors, to return success to false, and there will be no data. So if you go over to data, data is maybe undefined. That is if the success is false, but if the success is true, then we have our data here. Okay, so we are trying to use Zod to validate our schema. So when we validate this, we will see that if we check our env file, because all these things, we have our .env already installed, and .env is handling loading the env file. So when we load our env file and we try to validate everything, and those things are not they are not set in the env file. Zod here the success will be false, and then we log this error. We also throw the error in invalid environment variables. So invalid environment variables. So we're exporting a default function here. The port, then we're passing, we're converting the port to an integer. The node env here is actually a string, so we don't need to convert it. So for the session here, we have the secret, which is a string. The max age, which is supposed to be a number, so we convert it to an integer. Then bcrypt is also supposed to be a number, so we convert it to an integer as well. And we can as well remove this term because it will default to decimal number system. So going on, moving on, sorry, in the main text, what I did was actually bring this was here, this function was here. So what will happen is if I start the app, npm run starts there. So what will happen is, okay, good. Nope, was our terminal. I want to expand this. So you see that application we try to start first because of this function here. So this is the reason why I moved it up here. So that before anything, we can first of all check our hair. So nothing will happen now. The application will not even, the first thing to do is to check our env, our environmental variables. So if I go ahead and run npm run start there, and now, as you can see, it attempted, but the first thing is this initialize function, invalid input, expected string received undefined. So we can even come to our configuration file here and do something like that. You can say required, this is string, and in here we have params of error and message. say the message is port is required, like this. Okay. And okay, already port is there. Let's do it with port because we are defaulting to a value. Okay, so we have node env is required, or let's say node env copilot is just misbehaving up and down. Node env is not set like this. So we have the message here now. Node env is not set. We have session secret. Session secret is required. And we can also say it's not set. It's not set. And this one as well. So we now see the messages. They're all not set. So what we will do is we have okay. We have just trying to, because we have this in our env file. Well, here we're still getting these errors, so I never figured that out in the first place. Mm. Namespace. Should it be because of this? Okay. Let's not manually fix this. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, let's see if this works. Still doesn't. Okay, let's leave it like this and then just default the values, and we'll tackle that later. But for now, let's see development. And this one here is default to some secrets. Let's default this one to, and this one should be default to 10. Great. So there are no more errors. I'll try to figure out why we have this set and we're still getting, because of this process env. Okay, so our application now is in a good state. Let's stop the server. And the next thing is to create the Prisma service. Next is to create the Prisma service. So next G say service. We create the Prisma service. Okay, so now if we come over here, the source for we open Prisma, we see Prisma service here. Okay, so we need to import a couple of things. We need to import, we already have injectable here. Let's import module init. And we'll also import Prisma client. So we have import Prisma client from generated Prisma client. So if you take a look, you will see we've generated our Prisma client, and here it is. So we're importing it from client.js. Okay, so now that we have our Prisma client and we have our Prisma service, we need to extend Prisma client. So extend Prisma clients and implement an on module init. So we're inheriting this Prisma service is inheriting from the Prisma client, and it's implementing this interface, this on module init. So thanks to Copilot, well, the first method here is on module init. So before our application starts, we want to connect to our database. So we have another method, on module destroy. So if application stop or we shut down our application, we want to also disconnect the Prisma client. We want to disconnect from our database. This disconnect like this. Okay. So we have we'll add another method for development. This one just clean out mocks and other things. So we say async clean database. Clean database. Okay, so we have if process env dot node env is exactly equal to so we can do something like, let's go back to our generated file and make a change real quick. Config. You can say here it's an ZNU like this. So emulate development production test. Okay. Test second, production last. Okay, so we're good now. Is equal to, and now we have a type safety application for node environment. So you can see the auto completion here now. So I can select if it's equal to development or let's say production. We just want to return. We don't want to invoke this method. But if we're in development, we want to call the reflect object. So const models is equal to reflect on keys, this, and then we filter the keys. Filter the keys. So key if key 0 is not equal to this. We're looking at for private keys. Return is not returns. First of all, okay. models, return value, like promise any. Wow. String symbol. So we initialize our project with a strict flag. So it's trying to be strict. And if we add void here to work, you see either a string or symbol. No. Let me try to check what to actually return. String or symbol, an array of string. Okay, so this should be promise. Um, let's just say any. Let's leave it this way. And let's draw this error for this line. And this one is saying unsafe call that key implicitly has any type because expression of type 0 can be used to index type string index. Doesn't exist in string or index. No, that shouldn't solve the problem. No. I guess there are no quick fixes. Let's do this for this line. Quick unsafe call, and this aren't going to. Okay, I don't really know why we're getting this error here because of the safety, but this is weird. Okay, so let's just ignore this for now. Maybe we'll come back for it later. So what we're doing here, we're trying to clean up all Prisma instances with this. These are private keys. So if private properties. So if there are private properties, we want to ignore them. Every other thing we clean up and reset. There's for mocks, tests, and every other thing. So this is for development and testing. So this one here, before our application starts, we want to initialize, we want to connect to our database. Before it stops, we want to disconnect from our database as well. So now we'll move over to the Prisma module. And in the Prisma module, we already have our Prisma service. These providers. So we want to use this outside of the Prisma module entirely. So it's an export Prisma service. We want to use it outside of the Prisma module. So now we've exported it, so we can be able to import it in authentication or any other module and use it. Okay, so now we're done with our Prisma service and module. So it's time to seed our database. So if you come over here, we need to seed our database. So in the Prisma folder, the Prisma directory, we add another file and we call it seed TS. And in this seed TS, what we need is we'll import Prisma clients, import Prisma clients from generated Prisma. What else do we need? We need import everything as bcrypt from bcrypt. So we're not using bcrypt.js, we're using bcrypt. And if we don't import it like this, we get errors. So say const Prisma is equal to new Prisma clients. So now that we have a Prisma instance, which is which we use to interact with our database. So now it's time to define our main function, async main. So in our main function now, we need to hash our password. So we say const hash is equal to await decrypt hash. We make it asynchronous to make it to adhere to Node.js rules or things like that. Password, and then we say 10. So we want to hash this a default password for application. We want to hash and actually save it in our database. Okay, async. So after hashing our password, the next thing is to create a user. So we say const user is equal to await Prisma user creates. Okay, so before moving on, look at what Prisma is doing. Now we have, if you take a look at our database here, our schema, we have the node, we have user. I think only the nodes and user. So the Prisma client is type safe. So if you say Prisma dot, you will see that we have this method, query raw on user and the rest. But then we have the nodes and user, which are the the models in our schema. So the Prisma user. Then if you see, we have all these methods on the user: aggregate, count, create many and return, delete many, fields, find first or true, find many, find unique or true, group by, update many, update many and return, all of these things. So we want to create a user. So in this create user object, it expects an argument of an object argument. So inside this object, then we bring data. This is the data we want to create. So the data can be anything. Here, the data must be an object. So if you notice in our Prisma schema, we have the user has ID, email, name, notes. Note is an array. But we don't, if you want to create notes while creating a user, we can do that. But we don't want to do that. So this one has a default. It's auto-generated. This one also has a default. The date is when they created that is generated when we actually create a user and updated at the same time. So the things we need to provide are email and name. So if you come over here, we say, okay, email. We say, okay, so the password, we did not model our password. We have a user here. There is no password. So sorry about that. Good. So come over here. I'll see. Your question may be, why are we not including a password in the user? So the reason we are not doing this is because in a production environment or in an enterprise app, we have a whole lot of developers working on the app. So if we directly include the password here, some people may just fetch the whole user, including the password, which does not adhere to security practices. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, model password. In this password, you have hash, which is a string. Hash is a string. And we have a user. And this user is I'll say, okay, it's user ID, say user ID, which is a string. Okay, what is Prisma seeing? The module password, each module must have at least one unique criteria that has. So user ID is a unique field. So Prisma is now happy. So if you come over to our, we have password. So a user can have only one password. So make this a one-to-one mapping. So a user can have only one password, and a single password can belong to a single user. So come here and say npx Prisma migrate. That is if we're going to production, but we're just developing. So npx Prisma db push, and here we'll be good to go. Great. Now your database is now in sync with your Prisma schema. So if you come over to our seed, you can see const email. Okay, so okay, let's say user email is equal to Tony@max.com. So if you say email, say okay, user email. The name const username is equal to Tony Max, like this. Then we say name user name. Okay, but then we also need a password. So we say okay, password, and inside the password we'll say hash. Okay, so hash. No, password create what's happening here. It is great. So create here needs pass in the hash. So we can say if you don't want to do it like this, you know, in year 6, instead of doing hash, since the value, the key and the value are the same, you just pass the value as a key, and TypeScript will take care of the rest. So we can even format this and make it look good like this. Great. So now that we've our is here, you can even create some notes after creating the user. You can come over here and say, okay, so const user notes is equal to say Prisma dot nodes dot create many. So create many will take a data of an array. So say the first one here will be title. Let's say welcome note, and we need content. This is your first note. We also need the user ID. So user ID, which is user.id, like this. Okay, so we can even do let's copy this, bring it over. Let's see, this one is getting started. Can also change this one to Getting started note. Great. So this note now will be associated with this user here. So the next thing now is to actually, after creating this, we'll just log. In fact, we don't need all this. So we'll say await. But we need this one because we're using it to add the user ID right here. So after awaiting, we will say log say database seeded like this. So after seeding our database, the next thing to do is to call our main function. So main dot catch. We have e. And we say console error e. So process exit 1. Because we encountered an error, we log the error, then we exit with an error code. Finally, whether it's successful or not, we want to async. This is an asynchronous function. We want to await Prisma disconnect. Whether it's successful or not, we want to disconnect. Okay, so what is it saying? This return in function argument will avoid return was expected. Okay. Oh, what's happening? This strict mode is becoming more and more strict because I don't really understand. Async arrow function has no await. Yeah, so here is the await. So what are you saying? Disable this because I don't know what you're saying. Actually, no returning. Oops, there. Okay, let's just do like this. Yeah, so now we have this. This file must be inside the Prisma folder, the seed file. So now we need TSX to be able to execute this file. So say npm i-d tsx. So in our script, we add db seed, which is okay. Let's first of all add the script to seed script. Let's come over here and say Prisma, which is an object, and then we specify seed. The seed here should execute this command tsx prisma slash seed ts like this. And in our db seed, we say prisma db seed npm run db seed. Let's verify it's working. Okay, great. Okay, so there's an error here. Command failed exit when it takes Prisma seed. It's an error. Prisma note make menu. Unique constraint fade on. Okay, so let's come to Prisma. So maybe there's an error in our. Okay. Remove this unique and then just index its user ID. So mpx Prisma db push. Okay, so the reason why this is because we're making a user ID unique on a node. So nodes cannot have more than a single user ID. So this is what Prisma is trying to let us understand. But let's run this once more. npm run db seed. Running seed command. Okay. So what's the problem again? Unique constraint fade on field email. Okay. So because we tried the first time, and after we tried, the user was created, but then the nodes did not create. So we now have a user in our database with tony@max.com, but we're trying to create another user with the same email. So that's why we're getting this error. So we say npx prisma db migrate, npx prisma migrate oh. So there's this command for dropping databases. I've forgotten. Okay, so let's just run npx Prisma Studio. So if you run Prisma Studio now, we'll be able to see our database. Okay, no notes. But then there's a user with 20 of marks and 0 notes. So let's manually delete this. We'll talk about that command later. So here now we can be able to actually run npm run db seed. So there shouldn't be any errors. Okay, the seed command has been executed and we have database seeded. So if we come over to this place and we refresh, we have this user, Tony@Max with 2 nodes. So you can expand this and you have 3 collections. So we have the password here. The password has a hash and the user ID is this. We have the user. Also have the user here. Then the password. We can open the user's thing here. Then we have nodes, 2 nodes with this and this. Created at, updated at. The password is a hash. Then we have the username, Tony Max, ID, email, and all of those things. So if you come to the password, you can expand and you can see your data. The user ID, this is the user ID and the password hash for the user. You come to the notes, open this notes, you see the notes, the content, the title, the ID, and the user ID, when the note was created, and all of those things. So this is our studio. We can see our data here. Now we can even come over here, and if we try to open this, we can use our SQL viewer and view our data. Now we can see migrations. This one is taking care of our migrations, the migrations in our database. We have a user here. It's an ID. Okay, if you click on the user, we have email, tony@max.com, the ID, and the rest of the things are here. Great. So that's just it. Say this is a primary key. That's why you're seeing the key here. Open the note. We have this one is a foreign key. That's why the key is not yellow. Primary key, yellow. Foreign key is not yellow. This one is a date. Timestamp. Title is a string. This one is a primary key, but it's also a string. This is an row ID. For the row ID is 1. Then there is no row number 2. So the row ID is empty here. So this is basically our database and what we currently have. Okay, so now we can see that Prisma is working and we correctly set up Prisma. So now that we've seeded our database, and we can use this to, maybe you want to launch your application and at first you want to add the admin password, admin username, and other admin stuff that immediately you launch, the admin can be able to verify and log in. So you seed the data so that once the application launches, that data will be automatically created in your database. Wow. So now we've set up Prisma and Prisma is working. So what else do we need to do? So the next thing to do is to implement the authentication system. So we create user DTOs. There's a create user DTO and user response DTO. We also create the user service. We implement the user service and we create the user module and set it up. So first of all is the user DTOs. Come back here. The source, we have users, we have module. Then we'll create a folder and we'll call it DTO. So in this folder, we'll create a file and we'll call it create user .dto.ts. That's the Nodejs naming convention. So first of all, we import a couple of things from class validator. So we import from Nodejs class validator. Great. So we come here and we import his email, is string. We also need min length is string. Great. Okay, we also need min length and we need a max length. Max length like this. So what else do we need to install? For now, let's import API property from Nest.js Swagger, because we'll be setting up Swagger later on in application to be able to properly document our app. Okay, so now that we have this already, we export class, create user DTO. We'll say at API property. We'll say the description is user name. So we have we give it an example and we'll say example is let's say 20 max. The min length, the minimum length should be 2 and maximum length should be 100. 2 characters, the min length and maximum length 100 characters. So this should be a string, is string. And the minimum length is 2. It's an error message. Great. Thank you, Copilot. We're not done yet. That's why we're getting an error. What else do we need? So the name is actually a string. And now everything is correctly formatted. So this is validation. So we can come over here and say, okay, in our user DTO, create user DTO, we can export user name length. Then we'll say it's 2. Export const. Have export const user name max length, which is equal to 100. It will come over here. Instead of hard coding all these values to username min length, username max length. Here as well, username min length, username max length. Great. So if we change this to 3, now we're sure that it will reflect both here and here. So we don't have to come and change here and change here as well. Great. So we abstracted the username min length and the max length, so we can be able to import it elsewhere and use it as well. So the next, if you want to register a user, we also need at AI property, we'll see this one is the email. So at API property, and this one is actually the email. So say description, user email, and example, say Tony at max.com. Okay. I would say the min length is it's, or let's say 6. Export const user use the email. Oh, okay. Oh, so I got carried away. This is the email, and we don't need the million. Email can be any characters, any amount of characters. So we can just, this is okay. So say this is an email. It should be an email for validation. So this is an email, and here we leave this as an empty object, and we say message invalid email address. And this is actually a string. Great. So the next one, we also need the password. So say user password min length, which is equal to 8. User password max length. User password max length should be, okay. The user can enter any, let's say 30 characters, like this. Okay, so now you say at API property, we have description, which is user password. Example, you have example should be password 1, 2, 3, and the min length should be user password min length. Max length user password max length. And this is also a string. Is string. And the minimum length at min length is user password min length. Password is too short. At max length, password max length, password is too long. Password is also a string. Great. So we have our create user DTO, well structured and validated. So we need also a user response DTO. So say user response.dto.ts. So now we import a couple of things. Some of them are different from the ones we import in the create user DTO. So we simply import expose from at Nest.js class validator. We import API property from Nest.js Swagger. Okay, so sorry for what happened. That was actually kicked out by network. Okay. This is not included in the Nest.js class validator. So let's just do this one. Okay, so we are returning, we return the name, return the ID, the name, the email, created at, which is date, updated at, which is also date. Great. So since we will be selecting, we'll just return the user, no password. So this is what we'll be returning. Great. So now that we have our response user detail, we need to create the user service. So we come over to next G service user. Okay, so now we have the user service here. So coming into the user service, we need the Prisma service. We need create user DTO. We need bcrypt. We need user response DTO. And we have a config. We need config service as well. So, but first of all, in the source folder, let's create this and call it utils. And in the utils, let's create a file and let's call this one auth.ts. And we can simply export a function or a class. But what I would love to do is export async function, get password hash. So take the password. Which is a string. We import bcrypt. Everything as bcrypt from bcrypt. Great. Okay, so we see this is okay. Bcrypt hash. I remember we have the salt also okay. So, but we need our config. So before we can access our config, let's see password salt. Salt also, which is a string, we'll pass it to the password hash. Salt string. Okay, great. So we return await, or we return this bcrypt hash password salt. Okay, so now if you come back to our seed file, instead of saying this, we say this is equal to await uh, get password hash, like this. Import it. Um, this is const config. The sequence salt is equal to process env salt. So we don't need to default it to anything. Okay, let's say in case it is undefined, let's default it to 10. Pass the salt, and now the only thing we need is password. So coming over here, remove this, and we have password. Great. Get password hash. Now, if you come back to user service, we need to import a couple of things. So first of all, we import injectable. We already have injectable imported. Then, let's just import the Prisma service. Import Prisma service from Prisma service like this. We'll inject it there. So import create user DTL. We'll also import user response DTO. What else do we need to import? We import config service because we need it to actually communicate with our config. Great. So now that we have these things, config service. Great. Thank you, Copilot. Now we have Prisma and we have config, which is a config service. Great. So the first thing to do is creating a user. So we have we define an async method here. We call it create user, the user DTO. And what we expect is the user response DTO. So in here, create this. But first of all, we have the create user DTO. What I would love to do is to say const existing user is equal to await Prisma. This is of Prisma user find user find unique where email is create user DTO email. like this. So what's happening? So we're trying to check if the user already exists. So let me know what I do. Wait. Just jumped out of here. Remove this. I want to verify where the error is coming from. Okay. So we need to close this. Remove this. So first of all, check if there's an existing user. So if there's an existing user, we're not counting, we're just checking for the actual email. So remove this one. If there's an existing user, what we need is to throw a new conflict exception. Conflict exception from next common. And then we say user with this email already exists. We say user with this email. We can do something like that, or we can even make it more specific so they understand what we're trying to tell them. User with create user detail dot email already exists. Oh, thank you. Um, no, it's not. It's supposed to be in the user service. Yeah. User service. User service. Okay, remove this, change this to user service. In fact, let's remove this. App service, remove this. So user service now. We check table. That has been imported already. Well, let's remove this one. That one. Groups me everything coming this one. So okay. So we need to create a user module. So next G module user because of the Prisma service. And in here, we need come over here. We need to import. Where's the Prisma? Prisma module like this. Okay. So now we have Prisma service. We have create user detail, user response detail. Okay. User response detail. Oh, okay. So now if there's an existing user, we throw this conflict exception. But if there's no user, that is when we'll go ahead and create a new user. So we'll say const use const user is equal to await user creates this. Okay, so what we can do here is say create user detail, say password await, but this will not work. So password create hash and this. Okay, save assignment of one error type. Wow. So let's look at the auth. Return decrypt hash. Say const hash is equal to await get password hash. Already have get password hash. Okay. Okay, we don't have it. Okay, because it was not imported. So we now have it imported right now. So we spread the create user detail and then we modify the password by creating the hash. Okay. So after doing this, you will return new user response DTO, passing the user. So now it's throwing an error. Expect 0 argument but got 1. Okay, so our user DTO users out. So I guess we should just change this to users. Okay, let's change this to change this one here to users. And then we come into the users. This is the user module, user DTO. We need the user DTO, so we cut the user DTO to paste it in here. And we can go ahead and safely delete this one. And the app module, users module. So doesn't mean the user doesn't have a module. User module. Okay. Users. Rename these to users. Rename these to users as well. So now we're good to go. And if you check the app, users/users, remove this one, remove this users module, user module, remove this as well, and we import this one. Oops. Users. And we can import it. Oops. That script is now happy. And here, we'll come back to our create, our user response DTO. So we did not do what we're supposed to do here. We needed a constructor here. So constructor, and this constructor partial user responsibility. Oh, okay, yeah. So I'll do that in this partial. So we may return some of this or all of it. That's why. So if you come over to this place and now TypeScript is happy. Great. So now we can create and return a user. So now that the user does not exist, we create and return a user in the user service. Okay, so in the user module, we need a couple of things. We need a user service providers, users, user service. We also need we need to export the user service so we can use it in notes. So export service like this. The users module. Okay, so now we move over to now we can safely create a user. What's happening here? Users. I'm not even testing first. Users. Great. Okay, so now the next thing to do is move over to auth. We create our authentication service. So in our authentication service, we have the auth module. But we need to create the login DTO and the register DTO. So for now, in our user, we still have other things to implement to find the user by ID, find the user by email, and the rest. But first of all, let's come to our auth here, user module. Let's create a folder, call it DTO. And in here, let's add a file. Let's call this file login dto.ts. So inside of this file, we import two things. This email is string from at Nest.js class validator. So we also need to import API property. API property from Nest.js Swagger. Now export a class. So export class login DTO. API property, and here we need a description. So user email address. Example. So Tony at max.com. This email, first ones are empty objects. We don't need any validations there. We'll say message. Invalid email address. Invalid email address. Okay. So for the user password, and we'll do something like thank you, Copilot. And we are good to go. Okay, so now we need also a register DTO TS. And this register DTO TS, what we do is we import create user DTO like this. And then we say export plus register DTO, create user DTO. So we inherit this from the create user DTO and then we just return it. Then we are not adding any other things. Because if you want to create a user, we just provide the name, the email, and the password. Great. And now that we have our data transfer object files, in the auth service, we need to create guards. So in the auth module, actually, auth service, so add a folder and call guards. And inside of this folder, we'll add another file, and we'll call this file session out dot guard tx. So we need to import a couple of things in this file. We will be needing the injectable can activate, execution context. So we also import we need the request object as well. So say import requests from Express like this. Good. Now that we have these in place, okay, thank you, Copilot. So let's see what Copilot is actually doing. Session auth guard implements can activate. That's correct. So can activate context, which is the execution context, and it's expected to return a Boolean. So say request is equal to context switch to HTTP the get request, the request object from Express. That's correct. You say return, okay, return request or session for user ID is not equal to no. Please do, yeah. Okay, so user ID does not exist so we fix that real quick. So this is our guard to make sure that a user is logged in and the user they are authenticated before they can access the authenticated route. So we also need a decorator, current user decorator, and this one will be in the decorators. So we'll create a folder. I'll call it decorators. And in here, we create a file, call it current user dot decorator dot tx. And in this file, we need a couple of things, which the first one is create create param decorator. We also need execution context. Great. Let's see what Copilot is doing. Okay, current user export from query is equal to create param decorator. The data is unknown. The CTX is the execution context. Yes. The request is equal to CTX, which set it be get request. Okay. So we also need request. Request. So request should come from Express. What's the request in the list? Okay, so say return request session user, not user ID. So because we are getting all these errors because we are yet to set a user object on the request. So we get this error. So we try to get the current user ID, export current user ID, which is equal to, okay. So let's review this as well. Once request equal to CTX, get request exactly session user ID reads. So now we have our session auth guard in place. And we have our current user and current user ID decorators also in place. Okay, so now that we have this in place, we will go back to let's go back to our users, user service. And in the user service, we have create user. So add another method. In this method, we call it find by email. Find by email. And this should be async. Find by email. And the email is a string. Great. So say, okay, return consumer is equal to, wait, this is the Prisma user, find unique where email. If there's a user, return new user responsive to user or null. Thank you, Copilot. So we have another one, async. We'll call this one find by ID. So constituted goes awaits this Prisma user find, or if there's a user, okay. This, if there's a user, we return the user. We'll validate it using the user response DTO, or we return null. Or instead of returning null, we throw a new till not found exception. User with ID not found. And this won't work like this. So we say if user, that is when we do this. And here we directly return user. Remove this as well. And we are good to go. Find by ID. Okay. So the next method, we also need to validate user. Async, so validate user. Check the email, which is a string. And password. Password is a string. Okay, so we can actually do, instead of adding that, I added this in the auth to make it more clear. So we can move that function and make it a method in in the auth service. Okay, so what this is doing here is let's just import bcrypt. Import everything as bcrypt from bcrypt. Now, if you come over here, validate user, we have the email, we have the password. Now, first of all, we get the user. This user is defined by email. So we'll make sure there's a user. If there's a user, and then we'll compare the user and the user password. So we say await bcrypt compare user password hash. So find by email. It is find by email. So we see include password. Or we'll say okay, select. Let's not use include, we use select. Say password, yes. Hash. Okay, select hash. So we want to select, but in here we can also select email true. So this is a query optimization. So how this works is if you don't select the things you need, we want to get a user, but we need the password hash and the email. Or we can add another method. We can leave this as it was and add another method. We can do this, copy this, paste it here. And this one, we don't need to select anything. Let's leave it the way it is. And then we can say get user password. So we get user password, we use the email or the ID, user ID, which is a string. So this Prisma user find unique where ID, user ID. This is the user ID here. Great. And we'll select password, select only the hash. So what we are returning is the user. Or in here, we say, okay, we'll destructure this and we get the, what do you see, user. We return the user here. So come in here, instead of saying find that email, we say this uh, get user password, say user ID. Come over here, make this user ID like this. Okay, so now that we have the user, we have the password hash. So we just say user password hash. Okay, so we're getting this error, undefined cannot. We can do this here, can do this, and type as an parameter of type string, of hash and error type value. Oops. So you can say okay, user as let's say password hash string. Great. And now we are good to go. Or you know what? You don't even have to go through all this process, but this is how, if you want to do it like this, you can still do it like this. If you don't want to do it like this, we already had the user email here, or let's say email. So there are different ways to go about this. So you can say user is equal to await Prisma user find you where email. And now here, you just need to select password and the hash, only the hash in the password. So we select again and hash true, and we have the user. So we check here, we say if user true new not found exception, user with email not found. So this is saying what is possibly not, the user password is possibly no. Add another one here. It's an error. This, so we can see as password is great. And now this error is no more. So if user return the user, so this one is saying password is password hash is using the following properties, ID, email, or okay. So we can even instead of select, you can include, because we are returning everything, include password, include password. Okay, this great. Now it's saying password has the following. So we say return an object with password. We don't want to return the password. Nope, not the extreme. Let me spread. Or can define an object here. Password. We don't want to return that. Then we say the rest values, rest user is equal to user here. And we come over and we say return rest user. Okay, so what's the problem? It's asking you to why the email created that updated that user remove this. This one is happy and this one now is not happy. Since we validated, let's add this. Password can be null. I think we should just for this line hash on error type value hash string. Wow. So we can just do this. And we use ESLint to do this for this line. We don't want any errors. We don't want to return the password. Okay, so now that we validated, if the user is this, we validate their password, this validate user, and we will return the password. Sorry, we return the user because we've compared their password, validated the user, and everything is in place. So now we need the users module, which is in place already. And user service, I don't know why this one here. Okay. Another row, because I need it's correct. We'll check that out later because of the strict enabled. So now that we've completed our users service, let's go back to, so we have a decorator here. We'll have this. Now we look at the auth service. Now we'll see next G. So service. So user should be auth like this. So now we have our auth service. And we need to bring in some things. Okay, about due to time, we won't be able to actually do that. We'll stop here for today. And in our next class, we try to finish up the authentication and move over to implementing nodes and the rest. But for today, what we just did was trying to create a user, validate a user. We're getting these errors because we don't even have a session. We don't have a session with the user ID and all of these things. We haven't set, but we need the decorators here. We need the current user and the current user ID. So there will be, you know what a guard is? It's like a middleware that intercepts requests and all of that. So in our next class, we'll try to complete authentication and move over to nodes. Since this is the last KodeCamp module, after this, we try to look how we can push it to production, make it production ready, and protect it so it cannot be easily hacked. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask. Okay, so can you all hear me, please? When I was kicked out, who was giving the admin role? Okay, so go ahead, stop the recording and end the class, please.